I never thought I'd be the kind of person sitting in front of a microphone telling strangers on the internet how my boss stole $200,000 from me. But here I am, because when you've been lied to, gaslit, and almost erased from your own career overnight, sometimes the only way to get justice is to tell the story so loud and so clearly that nobody can ignore it. If you're new here, I don't usually share my life. But this one deserves daylight. And if you've ever been screwed over by someone in power, you're going to feel every word. Stick with me. And if you want the full receipts as I unravel this, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment with where you're listening from. I promise you'll want to hear how this ends. So let me rewind. I work in enterprise software sales, the kind of industry where bonuses and commissions can be bigger than your salary. For years, I delivered results. Quarter after quarter, I hit my numbers, signed the big clients, stayed late, took red-eye flights, and I believed my company when they told me my pay was market competitive. The reality? They'd been siphoning money off me for years, but I didn't know that yet. Everything exploded after I closed the biggest deal of my career, an international licensing contract worth over 8 figures annually. According to my contract, that triggered a commission payout north of $200,000. I didn't celebrate with champagne or a new car. I just exhaled. After years of grind, I finally thought I had breathing room. Student loans, mortgage, savings. But 2 weeks later, my paycheck looked wrong. Smaller than it should have been. At first, I thought maybe the payout hadn't hit yet, or maybe commissions were processed on a different cycle. I emailed payroll. No answer. I pinged HR. They said they'd look into it. That was the first red flag, the polite delay. The second red flag came when I logged into our payroll portal late one night. The line item that should have said Commission Accelerator Q2C had been replaced with something called Deferred Holdback. No explanation, no footnote, nothing in my contract about it. I took screenshots. At 1:00 a.m., I was scrolling through old pay stubs, comparing line items, and realized this holdback code had appeared only after my big deal closed. Before that, it didn't exist. When I asked my boss about it the next morning, he smiled like I was a kid who didn't understand grown-up math. "Don't worry about that," he said. "We true it up at year-end." But the way he said it, it wasn't reassuring. It was patronizing, like he was daring me to question him further. I did. And within 48 hours, I was sitting in a performance alignment meeting that came out of nowhere. Suddenly, I was on a performance improvement plan for not collaborating effectively. 3 bullet points, none of them measurable. I'd gone from closing the biggest deal of the year to being told I might be terminated in 90 days. Do you see the setup? He wanted me gone before year end, so the company wouldn't have to cut the $200K check. If they could push me out, they could pocket it as reallocated revenue. That night, I sat in my car in the dark parking lot with my laptop still glowing on the passenger seat. I pulled up my contract, read the commission clause, line by line, highlighted it in yellow. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't misreading. The money was mine. The only thing standing between me and that paycheck was a boss willing to lie, forge paperwork, and bury me under HR buzzwords. I should have felt angry, but what I felt was cold. Like a switch flipped inside me. I started documenting everything, screenshots of the payroll portal before and after the override, emails with timestamps, Slack messages where he's clarified I wasn't owed anything until December. Every piece went into a folder labeled simply receipts. Here's the part that still makes my stomach knot. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone who had once shaken my hand at my wedding. Someone who had toasted me at a sales summit for being the future of the company. That same man was now trying to erase me from the books like I'd never existed, and that was just the beginning. Because when I refused to back down, when I dared to keep asking questions, they escalated fast. Laptop lockouts, HR investigations. And then A, the final straw, the move that told me this wasn't incompetence. This was deliberate theft, but I'll get to that. For now, let me leave you with this. If you've ever trusted a boss to do right by you, double check the math. Look at the fine print. Because sometimes the person smiling at you across the conference table is also the one holding the knife. And trust me, you'll want to hear how I turn that knife right back around. So stick around, because in part 2, I'll show you the paper trail nobody at the company bothered to check. When you've worked in sales long enough, you learn 2 things. 1, the numbers never lie. 2, the people who benefit from those numbers will try to bury them if it suits them. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. My $200K wasn't deferred, it was stolen. I started with the basics. My offer letter. It had a clean, simple clause. Accelerator. 5% commission on deals over $5 million. Payable in the next payroll cycle after the deal is booked and recognized. There was no fine print about year-end true-ups, no holdbacks, no asterisks about manager discretion, just black and white words on company letterhead signed by both me and HR. Next, I pulled my pay stubs for the past 3 years. That's when I noticed something. Every time I closed a big deal, there was a line item for accelerator commission. Neat. Predictable. Always the same. Until now. For this deal, the biggest deal of my career, that line item had disappeared and been replaced with deferred holdback. The amount, 0 hours. It was like they'd created a shadow category just to hide the payout. So I emailed HR again. I didn't accuse them. I didn't scream. I asked very politely, "Hey, can you explain what deferred holdback means? I don't see it in my contract." Their reply was a masterpiece of corporate gaslighting. "Hi, name. This line item is part of a quarterly reconciliation process. Please note that commissions are subject to approval and timing adjustments. Everything will reconcile at year end. Thanks. Subject to approval." That phrase sat in my chest like a rock. Approval by who? My boss? The same guy trying to push me out? I printed the email, highlighted it, added it to the receipts folder. Then I checked my Slack history. There it was, a chat with my boss the day after the deal closed. I had written, "Do you know when the commission will hit?" He had replied, "End of year. We don't pay early on these." But I had older Slacks from a year ago, where he told another rep the exact opposite. As soon as finance books it, you'll see it in payroll. Same company, same system, completely different answers, depending on whose money was on the line. Screenshot, saved, receipts. The emotional toll hit me in waves. 1 minute, I'd be shaking with adrenaline, like I was ready to storm into HR and demand justice. The next minute, I'd feel hollow, like maybe I was crazy, maybe this was normal, maybe everyone else just accepted it. That's the trick with gaslighting. They don't just steal your paycheck, they steal your sense of reality. But then came the smoking gun. I reached out to payroll directly, not the HR rep, not my boss, but the actual third-party vendor that processes our checks. I asked a simple question. "Can you confirm if my commission for invoice Marie-47573 has been processed?" The rep on the phone hesitated, then said, "Yes, it was processed last week." I froze. "Processed?" "Yes, processed and paid, but—" "Hold on." Papers shuffled. "It looks like the payment was manually overridden and redirected to a holding account." A holding account. I asked who authorized the override. The rep said they couldn't disclose that over the phone, but the initials on the override matched my boss's admin. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car staring at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel just to stop them. They'd literally intercepted my paycheck, rerouted it, and then tried to bury me under a bogus performance plan before I could fight back. I remember whispering out loud to no one, "They stole it. They actually stole it." That night, I couldn't sleep. My laptop screen lit the dark room as I built a timeline. Offer letter, commission clause, deal closed, payroll processed, manual override. Every step document. Every screenshot labeled. The folder of receipts was now thicker than some lawsuits. And here's the cruelest part. At work the next morning, my boss smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Morning, champ," he said, patting my shoulder. "Let's have a good week." The same hand that patted my shoulder was the hand that had signed off on stealing $200,000 from me. I nodded, forced to smile. But inside, I made a decision. This wasn't about trusting HR anymore. This wasn't about giving the company a chance to make it right. This was war. Because once you see the paper trail, you can't unsee it. And once you have the receipts, you stop asking politely. You start preparing to fight. What I didn't know yet was that they had already set their next trap. A surprise performance reset meeting that would make everything 10 times worse. And that's where things got dangerous. The email landed in my inbox at 7:42 a.m. on a Monday. Subject line, alignment meeting, mandatory attendance. I knew that phrasing. It wasn't alignment, it was an ambush. The invite was from my boss, but copied to HR. The time? 8:30 a.m. Sharp. No agenda attached, no context. Just a Teams link. My stomach dropped. I've seen this play before. They don't want you prepared. They want you blindsided. I joined the call, camera on. My boss smiled like this was a casual check-in. HR was there too, with that carefully neutral expression they practice in mirrors. My boss started. "So thanks for hopping on, Name. We've been reviewing some concerns about your performance, specifically your collaboration style and ability to align with leadership expectations." My brain was screaming, "Collaboration style?" I just closed the largest deal in company history, but I didn't interrupt. I let him keep talking because I had hit record. One-party consent state. Legal. He pulled up a document and shared his screen. Performance Improvement Plan. A PIP. 3 bullet points, all vague enough to fit whatever narrative they wanted. 1. Improve cross-functional collaboration. 2. Demonstrate commitment to leadership directives. 3. Enhance communication consistency. No metrics, no numbers, just buzzwords. I asked calmly, "Can you provide specific examples of where I failed these expectations?" My boss cleared his throat. HR chimed in, "This isn't about specific incidents. It's about a pattern we've observed." Pattern. That word is corporate poison. It's how they justify anything without receipts of their own. I stayed calm, but inside, my blood was boiling. I took notes while the call was still recording, writing down exact phrases. Pattern observed. Leadership directives. Concerns raised informally. When the call ended, I didn't close my laptop. I exported the recording immediately, renamed it with the date and time, and dropped it into my receipts folder. That week, the trap tightened. Suddenly, every minor thing I did was under a microscope. An email I sent at 9:07 a.m. was flagged for tone. A slide deck missing one logo placement was non-compliant. A Slack message I sent with a thumbs-up emoji was unprofessional. It was absurd, but it was deliberate. They were building their narrative brick by brick. And yet, what they didn't know was that I was building mine faster. Every Slack export, saved. Every email chain, PDF'd. Every calendar invite with suspicious timing, screenshot. I even took photos of my whiteboard at home, where I tracked client calls they claimed I hadn't made. The stress was eating me alive. I barely slept. My chest felt tight constantly, like I was holding my breath all day. But I wasn't about to let them win by breaking me down. The breaking point came on Friday. My boss called me into a performance reset meeting. Same HR rep, same fake smiles. This time they said, "We're concerned your role may not be the right fit long term." Translation, they were preparing my termination paperwork. That's when I asked the one question they weren't ready for. Calmly, evenly, I said, "Before we continue, can you confirm whether the commission from invoice MA4473 has been processed? Because according to payroll, it has. And according to my contract, I'm due $200,000. Has that been accounted for in any of these discussions?" Silence. My boss's face went red. HR shifted in her chair. For a solid 15 seconds, nobody said a word. Then my boss muttered, "That's not relevant right now." Oh, it was relevant. More relevant than anything else in that room. I ended the call. Right there. No goodbye. No thanks for your time. Just clicked. Leave meeting. 10 minutes later, my company laptop logged me out automatically. My credentials were disabled. Lockout. I sat at my desk, staring at the black screen, and whispered to myself, "There it is. The trap snapped shut." But here's the thing. They thought locking me out meant they'd cut off my power. What they didn't know was that I already had everything I needed. The contract, the payroll confirmations, the override logs, the recorded meetings, the Slack exports, the trap they set for me. I was about to turn it into a cage for them, and that's when the story stopped being about survival and started being about counterattack. The screen went black, and just like that, I didn't exist. No laptop access, no email, no CRM, no payroll portal, nothing. That's the way corporate assassinations work. 1 minute you're on a call, the next you're a ghost. They don't say the word terminated, not yet. They just flip the switch so you can't function. The idea is to break your spirit before they hand you the paperwork. I sat there staring at the blank screen for a long time. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No Slack pings, no meeting reminders, no client calls lined up. For 10 years, my life had been measured in calendar invites and quotas. Now, nothing. Just me, my receipts folder, and the hollow realization that my boss had cut me out like a tumor. Then my personal phone buzzed. HR. "Hi, name. This is just a courtesy call to let you know we've placed you on administrative leave pending review. We'll send over the paperwork later, today." I kept my voice calm. "Review of what, exactly?" She hesitated. Concerns about performance and compliance. There it was again, performance and compliance. Vague enough to mean anything, sharp enough to stick if you don't fight it. I said, "Will this review include the fact that payroll confirmed my $200,000 commission was processed, then manually overridden into a holding account by my boss's admin?" Dead silence. Finally, "I'm not in a position to comment on that." Of course she wasn't. That was the script. HR doesn't protect employees. They protect the company from employees. I hung up before she could finish her sentence. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the lie. The lie wasn't just the missing paycheck. It was the entire story they were building around me. Bad collaborator, underperformer, not aligned. They wanted to rewrite my career in real time, so that by the time the dust settled, it would look like I deserved to be erased. But here's the truth. Lies always leave fingerprints. The first lie was the payroll override. I had the confirmation. The second lie was the PIP with no metrics, recorded. The third lie was HR's administrative leave, with no documented incidents. Call log saved. By morning, I realized I wasn't locked out. I was free. Free to act without worrying about being watched on the company network. Free to line up my counterstrike without tipping my hand. So I started making calls. First, the payroll vendor. I asked for a written confirmation of the override, not just a phone admission. The rep hesitated, said they'd need to escalate. Perfect. Escalation means documentation. Second, the client whose contract triggered my commission. I had built a relationship with them for months, so when I asked for a quick call, they agreed. I kept it casual. "Hey, just confirming, the invoice was paid, right?" They laughed. "Paid in full weeks ago. Why?" That laugh still rings in my ears. Paid in full, and yet my paycheck was sitting in limbo. Third, the compliance hotline. Every publicly traded company has one. Most employees never use it because they're afraid of retaliation. But retaliation had already happened. So I called. I laid out everything. Contract clause, payroll override, termination timing. They asked if I had documentation. I said, more than you can imagine. By Friday, HR sent me an email. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately. You will receive a severance agreement via DocuSign. I opened the document. My stomach dropped again. It wasn't just a severance offer, it was a gag order. In exchange for 3 months of pay, I'd have to sign away any right to pursue my commission, file complaints, or disclose the situation. That's when I knew. They weren't just trying to fire me. They were trying to buy my silence. I didn't sign. Instead, I printed the severance agreement, highlighted every clause that screamed cover-up, and dropped it in my receipts folder. And then I made my decision. I wasn't going to beg for my money. I wasn't going to wait for HR to review anything. I was going to go nuclear, board, bank, regulators, the whole 9 yards. Because if they thought locking me out meant they had the upper hand, they were about to find out how wrong they were. I woke up Saturday morning with one thought in my head. They weren't going to win. Not this time. Not with my money, not with my career, not with my silence. Most people who get fired just try to move on. They lick their wounds, update their resumes, and maybe rant on Reddit. But I had something most people didn't, a mountain of receipts. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that companies can bully individuals, but they can't outrun their own paper trail. So I started my counterstrike with 3 phone calls. First call, the state labor agency. I explained the situation line by line, my contract clause, the commission, the payroll processing, the manual override, the bogus PIP, the lockout, the gag order severance. The woman on the phone was silent for a long moment before saying, "This sounds like wage theft. You'll want to file a formal complaint." She emailed me the forms within the hour. Second call, the bank. I contacted the wage garnishment department of the bank that handled our payroll disbursements. I asked whether commissions could legally be routed into a holding account without employee consent. The rep pulled up the policy and her voice went sharp. "No, that's off policy. Commissions must be paid directly to the employee unless there's a garnishment order from a court." There was no court order, which meant what they did wasn't just shady. It was potentially illegal. The rep told me she'd have to file an internal escalation, and I thanked her. Another breadcrumb, another escalation, another paper trail I didn't even have to build myself. Third call, the board liaison. Most employees don't even know you can contact the board. But buried deep in the company's governance documents was a compliance email monitored by a board committee. I drafted a letter that night, attaching my timeline and documentation, offer letter, pay stubs, Slack screenshots, payroll confirmations, and the severance gag order. I sent it with the subject line: urgent, potential SOX compliance violation, wage misappropriation, SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley. Those 4 letters are corporate kryptonite, because once you frame something as a compliance failure, it's not just employee versus manager, it's potential fraud versus board of directors. Within 48 hours, I got a reply. "Thank you for your submission. We take compliance matters seriously and will initiate an internal review." That was the first crack in the wall. Meanwhile, I wasn't done. I also reached out to the client, the one whose massive contract triggered my commission. I asked them point blank, "Can you confirm the invoice was paid and when?" They didn't just confirm, they offered to send me the cleared wire confirmation. When I told them why, their executive paused and said, "Wait, are you saying you didn't get paid on this deal?" That pause was everything. Because if the client realized the company was screwing over the rep who brought them in, the trust damage would ripple far beyond my 200. By Tuesday, the retaliation ramped up. My former boss sent an all-hands email announcing organizational changes, framing my termination as a necessary step for team alignment. Translation: he was covering his tracks before anyone asked questions. But he didn't know I already had allies forming on the inside. One of my coworkers DM'd me from their personal phone. "Hey, just so you know, people are talking. Nobody believes the performance story. Word is the board asked questions about the payroll system. That's when I knew the board had actually started looking. And here's the thing about lies. They multiply. Once auditors start digging, they don't stop at one override. They'll pull every record, every manual adjustment, every deferred holdback line item. And if my 200K was rerouted, whose else was? How many other employees had been quietly shaved, deferred, or erased? The thought made my anger shift into something colder. This wasn't just about me anymore. This could be systemic. I sat back in my chair, staring at the stack of printed receipts on my desk. For the first time since the lockout, I felt calm. Not because it was over, but because the fight had officially shifted. It wasn't me against my boss anymore. It was my boss against the paper trail, the board, the bank, and the state, and I was the one who lit the fuse. The next step would be the most dangerous, because once they realized I wasn't signing their NDA, wasn't going away quietly, and wasn't afraid to escalate, they'd try one last desperate move. But by then, I had everything I needed, and soon everyone else would see it too. The first crack didn't come from the board. It didn't even come from HR. It came from a voice on the other end of a phone line that probably thought they were having an ordinary Tuesday. I called the payroll vendor again, this time through their support line. I gave them my case number, explained that I needed written confirmation for my records. The rep on the phone sounded young, nervous even, like they weren't used to dealing with employees directly. They pulled up my account, hesitated, and then said words I'll never forget. Yeah, it looks like the commission was processed normally, but there's a manual override in the system. The initials on the override are JL. Does that sound familiar? JL, my boss's executive assistant. I didn't say anything for a second. My pulse was pounding so hard in my ears, I thought the rep could hear it. Yes, I finally said. That sounds familiar. Can you send me that in writing? They paused. I'm not supposed to disclose internal notes. That's fine, I said, keeping my voice even. Just log this conversation and escalate it to your compliance team. That way, it's on record. They agreed. That was enough. Once it's in their compliance queue, it can't be erased. Another breadcrumb. Another crack in the wall. The second crack came from inside. One of my colleagues, let's call her S, called me late one night from her personal phone. She whispered like she was afraid someone might be listening. Look, I don't know exactly what's going on with you, but people are saying your boss has been moving commission numbers around. You're not the only one. I saw a weird holdback on my last payout too. Smaller, but it didn't make sense. I asked her to document it. She hesitated. I can't get involved. I've got kids. I understood. Not everyone can afford to go to war. But even that admission that someone else noticed the same phantom line item was fuel for my fire. The third crack came directly from the board. On Thursday afternoon, I got an email from the board liaison. Short, clinical. We acknowledge receipt of your documentation. Can you provide a chronological timeline of all payroll discrepancies observed? That line told me everything. They weren't asking if the discrepancies were real. They were asking for a timeline, which meant they'd already seen enough to know this wasn't just a disgruntled employee whining about severance. They were investigating, and that's when the panic started on the other side. My former boss called me from a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. His voice was low, urgent, not the smug tone I was used to. Listen, he said, I think we can work something out. I know this has been a misunderstanding, but if you're willing to sign the agreement, I can push for an enhanced package. Maybe double what you were offered. Translation, hush money? I almost laughed. Double what I was offered is still less than what I'm owed. You think I'm going to trade 200 grand for your pocket change? His silence stretched. Then in a clipped voice, be careful, Name. You don't want to make enemies in this industry. That was the moment the fear left me completely. Because if his best move was to threaten me, it meant he knew he was losing. I hung up without another word. Then I added a new document to the receipts folder, a memo to myself, dated and time-stamped, noting the call, the offer, and the implied threat. It wasn't proof yet, but it was evidence, especially if the board or regulators asked whether there had been retaliation. The cracks were widening. HR's silence was louder than words. The payroll vendor had escalated. The board was circling. And my boss? He was scrambling, desperate to patch a dam that had already burst. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not relief, not yet, but a certainty that justice was no longer just a fantasy. It was moving, grinding forward, slow but unstoppable. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just be about my missing paycheck. It would be about a system built on lies and a man who thought he was untouchable. Until the wall cracked wide open. The summons came in the form of a polite email. We'd like to schedule a mediation session to review your concerns. Representatives from HR, compliance, and payroll will be present. Mediation. That word is corporate code for we're cornered, but we need to make this look civil. The date was set for a Tuesday morning. Virtual, of course. I prepped like I was going to court. Because in a way, I was. When the meeting started, the lineup was exactly what I expected. My ex-boss, red-faced but trying to look calm, the HR manager with her bland half-smile, the payroll vendor's account manager, a lawyer introduced as outside counsel, and, sitting quietly in the corner of the Zoom screen, a board observer. That last one was the tell. If a board member's proxy was in the room, this wasn't routine. They opened with pleasantries. We're here today to resolve any misunderstandings. I didn't smile. There are no misunderstandings. There are documents. I pulled up my first slide. Yes, I had slides. Date stamped, numbered, crisp. Slide 1, my contract with the commission clause highlighted. Slide 2, the invoice from the client, paid in full. Slide 3, the payroll stub showing deferred holdback instead of commission. Slide 4, the email from HR calling it a quarterly reconciliation. Slide 5, screenshots of Slack messages showing contradictory explanations. Slide 6, a transcript from my call with payroll confirming the override. Slide 7, a note documenting the hush money call from my boss. As I presented each one, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't add drama. I let the documents speak. Because the truth doesn't need theatrics, it just needs oxygen. By slide 4, the payroll vendor's account manager looked visibly shaken. By slide 5, HR stopped smiling. By slide 6, outside counsel leaned forward and scribbled something furiously. Duck. And by slide 7, the board observer unmuted for the first time. I'd like that memo entered into the record, he said flatly. My boss tried to cut in. This is being taken out of context. The board observer cut him off. Quiet, you'll have your chance. Silence. Real silence. That's when I pivoted. Look, this isn't just about me. If my $200K commission was rerouted, how many others were? If this was a one-time mistake, why did my colleagues see a similar holdback line on their stub? If the payroll vendor's compliance team finds a pattern here, we're not talking about one employee's grievance. We're talking about systemic misappropriation. The word hung in the air, systemic. The lawyer cleared his throat. We'll need to take this under review. I leaned back, folded my arms, and said nothing. Because I knew I had already won. Not the war, not yet, but the room. The narrative had flipped. I wasn't the disgruntled employee anymore. I was the witness, the one holding the receipts, the one forcing them to confront their own paper trail. After an awkward pause, HR tried to salvage it. We value your contributions and regret if there have been miscommunications. Perhaps we can discuss a resolution offline? I stared straight into my camera. The only resolution is full restitution of my commission, correction of my employment record, and a documented review of payroll overrides to ensure this doesn't happen again. Anything less goes to regulators. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then the board observer said quietly, Noted. The session ended soon after. No one thanked me for my time. No one said goodbye. Just silent faces clicking. Leave meeting. But I didn't need thanks. I needed results. And I could already feel it. The cracks were now fault lines. Pressure was building. Something was going to break. And when it did, it wasn't going to be me. The hammer didn't fall all at once. It never does. It came in pieces, emails, calls, whispers from former colleagues. But each piece added up to the same thing. The lie had collapsed. 2 weeks after the mediation, I got an email from the board liaison. One sentence, clinical but seismic. Your concerns have been substantiated. Corrective action is being taken. Corrective action. That was their sanitized way of saying heads were rolling. The first head was my boss's. Word spread fast. Terminated for cause. In corporate speak, that means no golden parachute, no cushy severance, no clean resignation letter. Just a stain on his record that would follow him into every interview for the rest of his career. The man who had smiled while stealing from me was now radioactive. Next came the restitution. A wire transfer hit my account. $200,000 plus penalties, plus interest, plus attorney's fees, even though I hadn't hired one yet. The memo line read, commission adjustment, as if this was a rounding error. But I didn't care. The money was mine, and now it was in my hands where it belonged. Then came the letter. HR sent me a formal correction to my employment record. Termination rescinded. Employment separation reclassified as voluntary resignation. In other words, they couldn't erase what they'd done, but they could at least undo the smear. My record was clean again. And the final blow? Regulators. The state labor agency confirmed they were fining the company for wage theft. Small compared to their revenue, but enough to make headlines in our industry blogs. Enough to make future recruits think twice. But here's the part that mattered most. The calls I got from people inside. Co-workers who said, thank you. I saw weird holdbacks too. I thought I was crazy. People who whispered, we never trusted him, but nobody had proof until you stood up. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me getting my money back. It was about ripping the mask off a system built on quiet theft, showing others they weren't powerless. What did I do with the money? I didn't blow it on a car or a vacation. I set some aside, sure, but I also started a small fund, a side project to help workers fight wage theft. Nothing flashy, just resources, guides, legal contacts, templates for documenting evidence. Because if I could do it, others could too. They just needed a blueprint. And as for me, I walked away, voluntarily. I didn't take another job in the same industry. I didn't need to. I was done playing games where loyalty is punished and theft is dressed up as policy. The last time I thought about my boss was when a LinkedIn notification popped up months later. His profile headline read, Seeking New Opportunities. No endorsements, no congratulations, just silence. And me? I sat back, closed the laptop, and smiled. Not out of vengeance, not even out of triumph, but because the system that tried to erase me had erased him instead. That's karma. That's justice. And if you're watching this thinking, could that happen to me? Don't wait to find out. Check your stubs. Save your emails. Keep your receipts. Because sometimes the only thing standing between you and theft is your ability to prove the truth. And if this story lit a fire in you, do me one favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Trust me, there's always someone who does.